Book editors aren't supposed to be right. In a decade as a professional editor, I've never told an author, "You're wrong and I'm right." That's not my job. Understanding why that is can help writers have more productive experiences with editors and create more sustainable writing practices for themselves. Because the same perspective that makes writers look to editors for objective truths also makes writers judge and label their work and keeps them from seeing what their story can become. Let's talk about what a book editor's job actually is and how this perspective can make you a better writer. But first of all, let's take a deep breath. You've made it to the writing woods. Here, there's no pressure, there's no stress. We're all just storytellers trying to write the best story that we can. If you're looking for more folks who share your passion for writing and are working toward building sustainable, lifelong writing practices, join us at writingwoods.com. We're building such a special community over there, and I hope you'll be part of it. First of all, let's talk about developmental editing. This is the type of editing that addresses story-level aspects, characterization, plot, structure, that sort of thing. Many writers approach developmental editing like they're hiring a mechanic. A mechanic looks at a car, figures out what's broken, fixes it. But stories don't have blown head gaskets or worn out brake pads. Developmental editors aren't just diagnosing failure points. We're actually participating in the design process. Most often, when writers hand me a draft, they're really just handing me a pile of parts. Developmental editing happens pretty early in the process. We want to make sure to do it before any type of prose level editing. So usually the writer's been working on this for months or even years. They've gone through revisions and editing themselves, and they're usually kind of at their wits' end. You can't see the story objectively after a while. And a lot of the time when I go in and evaluate the story, I see something that's stuck between three different things. Sticking with our vehicle metaphor, maybe it has the engine of a sports car, the suspension of an off-road vehicle, and the cargo space of a pickup truck. My job as a developmental editor isn't to tell the author what it should be. I'm there to tell them what it could be. If you're looking at something that has all those different aspects, there is no saying, "This is wrong and it needs to be fixed." The question becomes, what kind of vehicle are we trying to build? I look at a story and I see potential. Maybe a subplot could actually carry the story. Maybe a character arc hasn't been fully explored. I look at that pile of parts and I say, this could be a strong off-road vehicle or an amazing pickup truck if that's what you want. And then we can talk about how to get it there. A good editor isn't handing down objective truths. We're reporting reader experience. As I read your manuscript, I'm paying attention to things like where I'm bored, where my attention drifts, where I'm confused, and what expectations and assumptions I'm forming. Then I try to figure out why those reactions are happening and whether they are in line with what the author was trying to achieve. The feedback isn't "this is wrong," it's "this had a certain effect on me as a reader." A good beta reader will provide similar feedback about how they felt. The difference in a developmental editor is that they'll usually be able to tell you the underlying mechanism that created the effect. A beta reader can often tell you how they felt, but not necessarily why. An editor will then give you options for moving forward, for either changing it or using it. So we're looking at the reader response, the reason for the reader response, and then options for controlling that response. And this sort of feedback is very different than someone telling you, here's exactly what you should do to fix your story. So when a writer goes into editing with that expectation, they may be overwhelmed by the feedback and unable to actually get the most out of the editing experience. Because editing, especially developmental editing, is fundamentally collaborative. Some writers assume that feedback is just prescriptive advice to be followed, like a mechanic telling you to replace your brake pads. But your job as the author is not to obey your editor. It's to understand your editor's feedback and implement creative solutions. Your editor will give you some ideas and some thoughts, and in a really productive author-editor relationship, the editor and writer build on each other. It's a really beautiful experience to talk to a writer after a developmental edit and hear them take my feedback and run with it. And we'll go back and forth almost like a brainstorming session, saying, well, this would work, or here's an example of what I mean. And the author taking that and going, oh, I understand what you're saying, so if that would work, then maybe I could do this. Your editor is not fixing your story for you. They're noting issues, identifying the underlying causes, and presenting potential solutions, explaining how and why they would improve the story. And then you as the author get to take that and build it into your revision plan. Line editing is a similar situation. Line editing happens at the prose level, and you actually have the editor making changes to your manuscript. Through line editing, we're strengthening and tightening the prose. I'm looking for the 4 C's: concision, clarity, consistency, and correctness. But you hand a manuscript to 5 different line editors, and you are going to get 5 different line edits. And that doesn't mean 4 of them are wrong. Yes, some things are objective. Punctuation issues, spelling errors, even style issues when you're following a style guide like Chicago. But a line editor is interpreting the author's intention, matching the author's writing style, and making judgment calls with every single change. I may choose to make a sentence more concise at the expense of the voice. I may also add a few words to improve clarity at the expense of concision. Every change requires balancing the gains and losses. And a good line editor will often leave comments asking about your intention if it was unclear, or explaining why they made certain changes. When I line edit, I expect the author to go through my edits and accept, reject, or modify the changes. Sometimes I leave multiple options because it just depends. What exactly are you trying to say? Your book editor doesn't want to be right. That's not our job. We're not trying to tell you how to write your story or how we would have written it. We ask questions, we offer possibilities, and we help the author make informed decisions. Because ultimately, it isn't your editor's book, it's yours. And this matters during the writing process as well, because many writers approach their own work in the same way that they approach editors. They want to know if their story is good, if the scene is right. But these kind of questions often don't have objective answers. The better question is, what effect is this creating? What response are we eliciting in the reader? And approaching your writing process this way can make a world of difference, because you'll stop trying to figure out if your story is perfect. That's the wrong goal. You can take the highest performing race car in the world, drop it on an off-road trail, and it'll get stuck. Not because there's something wrong with it, but because that's not what it's made for. Stories are no different. The goal isn't to write a perfect book. It's to express the story in your mind onto the page and to the reader. And sometimes the story in your mind changes. Sometimes you set out to create one thing, and during the process, you discover that it actually wants to be something else. And sometimes your editor is part of that discovery. That is my real job, to help the writer find the story in the pile of characters and metaphors and ideas. Sometimes it's exactly what they envisioned, and sometimes it's not. But if in the end the writer learns something and winds up with a story they're proud of, that's all that matters to me.